And when I was in grade 5, 6, girls could not wear pants in the classroom. I'd walk to school with my brothers. We'd get there year round, and I'd have to change, especially in the winter, because you're not going to wear a skirt walking to school. And I'd change once we got to school. So Eileen Stubbs was elected as a school board trustee. She changed the regulation so that girls could wear pants in the classroom. And ever since then, I've believed that one person can make a difference, and you can use your political system to do that.
Our issue that our group is focused on was the cost of removing snow from streets and sidewalks.
Our question for you is, do you think the city is currently being as effective as possible keeping our roads safe during the winter?
I believe our annual budget for snow removal is about $8 million. So that's a big number, depending on the amount of snow we have each year. And that's our challenge with the snow removal budget. Overall, our priority is to clean streets that have public transit on it, that are high traffic routes, access to medical facilities, and then they start moving out to the other neighborhoods. About 10, 15 years ago, Calgary did not do as good a job cleaning the streets in the residential areas. And Calgarians were upset, and they increased the budget. So it's a balancing act. I think we do an effective job. Where we get caught as a city is if we have a snowstorm on Monday, there's a really big one, we haven't got everything cleaned up, and then Wednesday we have another snowstorm. So I'm pleased that the city's increased the amount of budget for it.
Our group was focusing on the current economical downturn and how the city can improve the situation.
The big question that flows out of this issue is, if you're elected, what ways can you see supporting struggling businesses while also maintaining the services we count on the government to provide?
You have to make sure that the costs that the city controls remain reasonable. So the costs that the city controls are electricity, water, property tax, business license, development permits, garbage removal, and I'm sure there's some others that we can think of, or you may think of in the room. Our obligation is to keep those low as much as possible. There's an agency called the Calgary Economic Development Association, which is funded to $10–12 million a year by the city, and they sell Calgary to industries around the world. So they're the people working hard to get the Amazon bid right now. So as a city councillor, I would continue to support Calgary economic development.
If you're successful in your election, will you be in favor of making it mandatory to make your donor lists public?
I would support limiting how much people can donate. And so the current limit is $4,000 per person, per election, per year. So the average campaign in Calgary costs about $92,000. Our budget is lower than that because money is tight. It's hard to raise money. Because the other thing that happens is when you're donating to a city campaign, there's no tax receipt. When you donate to a provincial or a federal campaign, there are tax receipts.
The issue that our group has been focusing on was the bid for the 2026 Winter Olympics.
The question that flows out of this issue is, will it benefit the city to spend $4.6 billion to host the Olympic Games?
The Olympics, there's mixed research out there as to what the benefit is to the host cities. There's some articles, and I'm sure you found them, that said it's the greatest thing since sliced bread. 1988 put Calgary on the map. I was traveling in Europe this spring, and people said 88 Olympics when I said I was from Calgary. But there's also information out there that if you don't use your facilities afterwards, that is actually a big cost and drain to the taxpayers and the residents of the host city. So there's a committee of city officials, athletes, and business leaders saying, should we do this or not? And they reported to City Council in July, but didn't answer all the questions as to how many of our existing facilities can be used again. So back to the question, would I support an Olympic bid? At $4.6 billion, I'm not convinced it's the right thing to do yet. I will wait, though, for the report from the recommendation committee.
The Calgary Flames want a new arena, but the city and the Flames can't make an agreement. We have 2 questions for you.
If elected, will you commit public taxpayer money towards the construction of the new arena?
And if we do end up building an arena, how will it affect our economy?
So I am willing to commit land to the arena. That's my opening position. So we do know the mayor has a position, and we do know the Calgary Sports and Entertainment Group have a position. And we tend to think of them as just the Flames, and we won't tease Mr. Fawcett that he has a Flames jersey on today. If I was wearing that, that could be a conflict of interest. We have to remember that that whole sporting organization is the Flames, it's the Roughnecks, it's the Stampeders, and it's the Hitmen. So when I'm meeting with people in community, they're saying sport is important to Calgary on the whole. We are a major Canadian city with a population of 1.2 million people. We'd really like to have a hockey team, an NHL hockey team. I will not support, what I will support is public money going in as long as there's a public benefit.
The Calgary Flames want a brand new arena to practice and have games in, and the big question flows out of this issue. If you were elected, how might this problem affect residents in Ward 11?
So it would have a huge impact on the neighbors in that community, and back to how many jobs are created. I don't know how many people that live in this area that would have jobs relating to. There's taxi drivers, there's bus drivers, there's LRT drivers, there's the mechanics for the Zamboni. There's a lot of jobs related to having an arena.
The municipal issue our group focused on was tax funding for bike lanes in our city. The heart of the issue is bike lanes can reduce vehicle traffic, but they come with a price tag, so the idea of bike tax has been mentioned.
Our question is, do you think it's fair to charge a tax on bike purchases to help fund the bike lane project?
Interesting question. So there's some school of thought when it comes to public financing that you have special accounts for each project. So if it's an arena, any money you raise from the arena goes into an account so that if you're spending on the arena, it goes there. If it's public art, anything raised for public art only gets spent on public art. So your question is suggesting that to pay for bike lanes, we tax the cyclists. And I'm going to say overall, I don't support that philosophy. Because we're together as a community, we're together as a society. And there's some things you spend money on that creates money and cash that you can spend on other things. So to me, bike lanes are part of our infrastructure for transportation and getting around Calgary.
Our focus group issue was the Green Line LRT, and the question we want to ask you today is, where will most of the money come from? Provincial and federal are paying about half, but what about the other half? And will the Green Line LRT be worth it to Calgarians?
So the Green Line has been approved by our current City Council. The majority of the funding is going to come from the provincial government out of their carbon tax income. And I'm not going to get into that. You guys can do additional research on that. I have 2 cautions on the funding of the Green Line by the carbon tax. Is if we have a change in our provincial government, will the promise be fulfilled? And then how big of promise list does our City Council have for current infrastructure spending? Historically, so most of my answers so far have been factual. This one's going to be an opinion. We like to talk about, our City Council likes to talk about big projects and big ideas. And they put it in a planning document, and then 10 years later they get the funding for the project. The Southwest BRT being our most recent example. And over the 10 years, people forget that that was a good idea 10 years ago. And now we have the money for it. They start building it, and as residents, we forget. So what I would like to see, and this is my opinion, I would like a complete list of all the projects that our previous city councils have promised, and what the dollar value is, and the timelines for them.
And the issue we are researching is the public art funding.
The heart of the issue is the cost of the art in the city versus the look of the art.
Our question is, are you in favor of decreasing or increasing the funding for the public art program?
I am in favor of decreasing funding for public art, and I'll tell you why. And that's because we have quite a bit of cash sitting in our public art policy reserve account. So the City of Calgary operates with a reserve account of $1.8 billion. That's cash sitting there. They're in 72 different bank accounts. So here's another thing I have an opinion on. We have to review those 72 bank accounts and make sure that they don't have too much money in them. And I've picked on public art because 4 years ago, the public art account had $1.2 million in it. So that's 2-3 projects of the size we just saw at Beaufort Towers. Today, it's $4.4 million. So if we're still getting public art in Calgary, but the account's gone up $3 million in value, why are we putting so much into it? So right now, it's 1% of a project up to $500,000. I would suggest it should be 0.75%.
The issue that we focused on is the roads and infrastructure.
The heart of our issue is, how does the city keep up with the roads department?
The big question that flows out of this issue is, how will city council lead the roads department, and where is roads in your priority list in this sprawling city?
Roads have to be maintained, they have to be repaired, they have to be cleared, so back to the snow removal question, but they also have to operate if there's been an accident on them. So we do have to support our existing infrastructure, but we do have to be realistic back to the bike lane question. If people don't want to drive as much as they used to, we don't need to build as many roads. So we have to balance that. We were at a candidate forum where they asked about self-driving cars.
Oh!
Yeah. So how many cars will that take off the roads? Do we need to continue building big roads? At the same time, you may want to live on the edge of Calgary. You may want to live on the south side going to Okotoks. You may want to live on the west side getting closer to the mountains. And so as a city, we have to create an environment where people have housing choice.